My new apartment was amazing, even if it was a little bit too big for just me. It had this giant master bedroom with a huge bed. I remember the real estate agent saying most people would turn this second bedroom into a nursery, but you could also use it as a home office or gym. When she said that, I imagined myself lying in bed at night scrolling through social media. That's when I decided to make the spare room my bedroom. The apartment was located in an old building, so the internet wasn't great. The only place I could get a strong Wi-Fi connection was from the living room, which is why I chose to put my bed there. I signed the lease and moved in a few weeks later. I spent the first few days unpacking and getting used to the creaky floors and the uncomfortable bed. It was during one of those nights when I was scrolling through Instagram that I noticed something strange. There were these dark spots all over the ceiling. They looked like shadows. I got up and walked to the window to check. The curtains were drawn back, but there wasn't anything outside that would cast a shadow in that spot. I went back to bed and continued scrolling, trying not to think about it. But then I heard a noise. It was a soft thump, like someone jumping onto a mattress. I froze. I didn't want to be too dramatic, so I tried to convince myself that it was just the pipes. In the morning, once the sun was streaming through the windows, I got up and went to the kitchen to get some coffee. On my way, I noticed that the blinds were closed. I pulled them back and saw that there was indeed a tree branch outside, the one that was casting the shadow on the ceiling. I smiled and thought to myself, how silly of me to think that there was someone else in the house. But then I remembered the thumping sound. I decided to investigate further. I took out the vacuum cleaner and started cleaning the floor. As I vacuumed near the bed, I noticed something weird. The carpet was slightly indented where the bed legs were placed. That meant that whatever had been on those spots before the current tenants moved in had left permanent marks. One paused and considered calling the landlord, but I decided against it. After all, it was just an old apartment. There was no need to make a fuss over a few dents in the carpet. The rest of that day I spent exploring the city, so I didn't have a chance to dwell on the mystery of the imprint. But when I got back that evening, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. I changed into comfortable clothes and made myself dinner while watching TV. Then I got back to work and started typing up a paper due the next day. It was almost 2 a.m. by the time I finished. I was exhausted and my eyes were drooping. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it again, the soft thump of someone jumping on the bed. This time it sounded closer, more sinister. I sat up and listened, heart pounding. Had my neighbors come home? Were they torturing some poor animal? Trying to calm myself down, I reminded myself that if anyone was there, I would have heard them come in. Plus, there were no lights on in the apartment next door. Maybe I had just imagined it, I told myself. I lay down and waited for sleep to take me. But as soon as I closed my eyes, I heard it again. Someone was definitely jumping on my bed. Panic surged through me. What should I do? Call the cops, yell for help, or pretend that everything was fine? Before I could decide on a course of action, the thumping stopped. Footsteps approached my door, and then it opened. Hello? Yell. I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. The footsteps came closer. I could hear someone moving around in my room. Then the bed dipped under the weight of a person. I screamed and threw the covers off me. Barefoot and naked except for my pajamas, I stumbled out of bed and ran to the corner of the room. There, behind the dresser, I hid, pulling the loose wires of the lamp cord over my head like a makeshift shield. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, for what felt like hours. But it was only a few minutes when I heard the bed creak again. Slowly, ever so slowly, I uncoiled myself from behind the dresser. As I did, I noticed a blanket on the floor where the bed had been. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I picked it up and brought it to the window. Then I stepped back and stared at the thing in front of me. It was a body. Well, part of one anyway. An arm, a hand, a few fingers. And then there was the mouth, wide open and still breathing. It was attached to a face, pale and pretty, with long black hair covering most of it. Her eyes were wide and scared, her lips moving silently. I felt a surge of sympathy for her, but also terror. Who was she? How did she get here? And how could I escape without her seeing me? I wanted to call for help, but I knew that if I did, she might bolt and disappear. So I pretended to be asleep when I heard her move. I lay perfectly still on my side, hoping that she wouldn't notice me. She didn't speak, but her eyes never left me. I could feel her gaze burning into my skull, and it was driving me crazy. After what felt like an eternity, she finally got off the bed and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the water running, and then the sound of a shower. Once I knew she was occupied, I got out of bed and went to the window. I needed to get out of the apartment, but I couldn't risk letting her see me. So I waited until I heard her turn off the shower and make her way back to the bedroom. Then I slipped out the front door and down the stairs. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station. I told them everything that had happened, but they didn't believe me. I mean, who would believe a story about a girl who crawled out of a window and then vanished into thin air? They must have thought I was crazy because they took me to a psychiatric hospital instead of investigating my case. That's where I stayed for 3 months. One day a social worker came up to me and said, "You can go back to your apartment now. We found the girl and we're sure she won't be coming back anytime soon." Relieved, I packed my things and returned home. The police had come to the conclusion that the girl had climbed in through my window while I was asleep and had only left when I turned on the lights. As for how she managed to crawl through the window without waking me, they couldn't say for sure. But they suspected that she was under the influence of some sort of drug that rendered her almost completely silent. As for why she was in my apartment, the police didn't have a theory, but I have one. It's the same reason why I still can't sleep in my bed at night. It was because underneath that bed was a secret passageway that led to the apartment next door, and I believe that the girl had fallen through it and somehow ended up in my room. I never told the police about the passageway. I was afraid that if they investigated, they would tear apart my apartment and find other things that were better left hidden. Things like the fact that there was a gun in my closet. It belonged to my ex-boyfriend, James. He had broken into my apartment a year ago and left it there when he found out that I had broken up with him. I hadn't had the heart to tell the police, so I kept quiet. One night, 2 years after the incident with the girl, I was woken up by a loud crash. I got out of bed and went to the living room to find James standing there with a bloody nose and a pair of scissors in his hand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean to break in. I just needed to see you one last time." I was frozen in shock, unable to speak or move. Suddenly, James lunged at me and grabbed my hair, pulling it tight. "Why did you break up with me?" he screamed. I cried out in pain. That was when I saw the familiar glint of metal in his hand. He had the same pair of scissors that he had used to smash the coffee table. But now, he was holding them like a knife. "Don't hurt me," I begged, tears streaming down my face. At that moment, the ground shook beneath us, and a large crack appeared in the ceiling. I looked up just in time to see the wall collapse and reveal a dark hole. From above, James and I stared at each other in horror. Then we both ran for the secret passageway.